Hello, my name's Amanda from Suddenly Autistic, and in this video I want to read out to you actually something that I've been writing to help myself. I sat here the other day, Monday it was, to make a video about a constant struggle in my life, and this is me knowing where I want to go and what I want to achieve, having clear goals, and in particular, say in my business, attracting work or taking a course or participating in something and then getting quickly overwhelmed and buried in the detail. So that feeling of overwhelm, of never having enough time, of not being able to do things to my full potential, not being able to reach my full potential with a task, has been a constant problem for me. Over the period of this year, as I have realised and been diagnosed with autism, and I've also already got my ADHD diagnosis, and on top of that there's a layer of trauma which is informing a complex PTSD situation that's going on at the moment. I have this this mental reality. I have this physical manifestation of all of that through the overwhelm, if you like. And what I'm trying to do in this essay is what I was trying to do in the video when I was making the video on Monday is delve into that. What is this? You know, which part of it is autism, which part of it is trauma, is about trauma, which part is ADHD, executive processing, what's just me, what's my capacity, am I doing things that are beyond my capabilities, my intellect, my time? What's going on here? Why am I having this same problem all the time? So that's where it was coming from. I sat here on Monday to make a video. I made a video, and in making that video and actually talking it through, I came up with an analogy of actually a charity shop and a hoarder. And I was using those things to kind of think about myself. And as I was doing it on the fly, it kind of felt like it made sense on one hand, but it needed more examining. So anyway, I didn't publish the video, I parked it, I carried on with my day. I actually had therapy that night, so Monday night I saw my therapist, and then yesterday I had other things to do, so I didn't think about it, and then this morning it sort of came to me that I needed to come to process this more fully. So that's what I've done, and how I've processed this is to write it out as a form of essay. So I wanted to explore this with you. So the hoarder and the charity shop. The charity shop then became rewritten as a charity/vintage shop. So a kind of place you might go, like an Aladdin's cave, I guess, where there's a definite bias towards vintage treasures, I guess. But there's also an element of chaos and maybe trash, I guess, that could be typically found in a charity shop, or less valuable or less vintage stuff. So anyway, the charity shop or the vintage shop and the hoarder. There are several pain points that live within me. Some of them are adopted, some of them are inherited, and some of them are inherent, my personality, my capacity. The pain that's most authentically mine is that the one that trips both my intellect and creativity, the two things that I value most about me as a human doing versus human being. And I do like to be clear that I see value in both things, both in being and in doing. And through doing, we become, and through becoming, and through sitting and doing nothing, we integrate our beings. So I guess that's why I've made that clear. So the idea of this hoarder, me seeing myself as a hoarder. So hoarding, according to the DSM-5, is a class of obsessive-compulsive disorder. It centres around relating to possessions, typically objects, and more specifically around a desire to collect and gather items and keep hold of them, regardless of their value and without accounting for items already in one's possession. Hoarding behaviour can lead to an unhealthy and dangerous build-up of clutter and chaos. In extreme cases, this may end up destroying both the hoarder and the hoarded, as each suffocates under its own weight. Hoarding can be a mental illness in its own right, or a behaviour that shows up in a range of mental illnesses. It can also develop out of a special interest of the kind we see in autism. And it's this link that makes most sense to me. So when I stumbled across this idea, and it's raining now, I thought of myself as a hoarder. It just came to me. And then I'm kind of going back and finding out, oh, actually, there might be something in this. There are hoarding traits in autism. So many studies have looked into hoarding behaviour in autism in an attempt to understand it better and work out if it's the same or different to the types of hoarding that those with autism undertake. There is a simple write-up which summarises the sort of science, if you like, and that's this article, Does Autism Lead to Hoarding? An exploratory and reflective blog by Olivia Handocco from December the 9th, 2020, and I'll put a link down to that. To me, as someone who is autistic and whose mind suddenly plucked the word hoarder out of the air while meditating on my pervasive problems, I feel I can add something to this discussion. A little insight maybe, at least into how this feels and why this hoarding behaviour manifests for me. So what do I hoard? It's often easier to start with what I don't than what I do. And what I don't hoard is stuff. I'm very much a fan of open, uncluttered spaces. I do like my little shrines to the sparkle fairies and woodland fantasy like display shelves, bookshelves and antiques, but I also like simplicity. I don't have any issue at all in throwing out things, really. Even things that I collect and like. I'm not that attached to things, although I do enjoy a nice aesthetic. But I'm not over sentimental about stuff. What I do have a problem with are thoughts and information. The word hoarder came to me as I was thinking about my brain clutter. I was reflecting on just how many different types of information I'd absorbed the day before, which was a Sunday. I'd read the news and then researched a few articles more deeply. I'd picked up some art and read about that. I'd been looking up details on plants that I was interested in and taken photos of, then about birds, same, and then I was captivated by a podcast that I was listening to, which was discussing fossils. The fossil story got me onto a deep dive fixation that led me into studying ancient fish fossils. And a discovery on Orkney around the origins of sexual reproduction that I found quite interesting. I then started getting fired up in my mind and thinking and imagining about the fossils that I might find around me. We're living in a sandstone country, and apparently there are fossils in sandstone. So where might I dig? How might I dig? What tools would I need? Would I try dissolving this limestone in chemicals like acids, or would I chip away at it? If I chipped away at it, would I be likely to damage the thing? How would I know if I found something, if I've got the right spot? That's where my brain was going, and this was on a day that I was taking off, so it was literally Sunday, my rest day. I sort of hoard information in my brain. I mean, I don't know that I'm attached to the information as a classic DSM-5 hoarder would be to their objects, but I'm definitely invested to the point of it being too much for me. I literally can't help myself but dive deeply into anything and everything. I mean, I watched Squid Games, then had to find out about Korean customs and family structure, the philosophy that might have got those people into those positions, social welfare in Korea, the North-South divide, and so on and so forth. I find it hard to just sit in front of the TV and watch something. I always want to know more, to dive deeper, to broaden or enrich the content that I'm presented with, almost to create something extra. I've always loved this about myself and my brain. I'm never bored, I'm never depressed. Well, I get sad and down, but I don't find myself in depression. I literally see the world in a grain of sand, and isn't that what we're supposed to aspire to? I see beauty in everything, and I'm captivated by the minute details that exist within things, and yet now, that same passion, that same brilliance is tripping me up and crushing me. I literally can't get stuff done. So then we move to the charity or vintage shop. Charity/vintage shop. You see, I'm indecisive. I have that as a trait. Another picture started to form in my mind, and that was of a vintage shop, the type I love to wander through. that both inspires me and makes me slightly anxious due to the overwhelming smells and the chaos. I'd much prefer that place to be organised and catalogued like a museum, but hey, most aren't, and I know that if I can get through their sensory overload, I might just find a treasure. And there's always joy and excitement in finding and discovering new things. A store that turns one man's trash into another's treasure, or does it? Is that really what they want, trash? I'm starting to question this whole idea. Vintage shops take items and give them another chance to shine, to be seen in a new, different light, or by a different audience, in a different generation. They don't really create new things as such, but they do create new opportunities, and I really like that. That's the creativity that I value and enjoy. But how do they source the items that they sell? Do they get to choose what comes in? Do they have a right to set out a manifesto? If they're asking for donations or taking donations, what is charity? Who gets to say what's trash and what's treasure? So many questions. I try to bring myself back to the big picture and decide that a vintage shop must make some decisions, but opt to stick to a decision that's easiest to understand and visualise, a choice based on physical capacity. I imagine a vintage shop in the literal sense, just one shop with its square meterage, bound by rules and regulations of what it can and can't be squeezed inside, in order for it to be safe, effective and compliant with regulations. The charity shop, or the vintage shop, must choose where to draw the line. It can't take in everything. It will flood the store and make it unsafe. It might even devalue the items that it's got inside, the things that it's trying to create value from. It might put its staff and customers into a difficult or even dangerous position. It might fully fail to fulfill its mission if it doesn't put a limit somewhere. But that's another question. What is its mission? I've thought on this for some time, and then it started to come together. I see analogies in things and links in things, and while this may be a bit corny, it also sort of works. So I started playing around with the word charity. Charity, Charity, the C, create. I love being creative. The H, hope. I'm a hopeful person. I hope. I have a lot of hope in me. The A, and boring but works. And then the R, realise. So create hope and realise. And then we have I and the TY, inherent for I, and then beauty for the TY. So I end up with create hope and realise its inherent beauty as my, I suppose, my message that's within that word charity. And then I'm looking at vintage, Vintage, a voyage, V, voyage. I like journeys, I like going somewhere, I like mental and physical journeys. The INT, into, or intuition even, but into, I think that works. The A, another, and then GE, generation. Doesn't that work? We're going to voyage into another generation. That's what the vintage part means. So when I put charity and vintage together, it feels like something that really resonates with my values. Linking that to autism. So one thing I do agree with Dr. Baron Cohen on is that autism is about pattern seeking, and I am a pattern seeker. Much of the rest of what he says just makes me feel angry and misunderstood, but that is another story. So I seek patterns, and I seek them in a particular way. I am a scientist, both by formal education and by temperament. I was born this way. Scientists need to accumulate or produce data. In that data, we search for patterns. In the patterns, we find meaning. That meaning may be called insight. That insight may create new knowledge. That knowledge probably is beautiful. If we go back to the data, we need a lot of data. Scientists generally like more data. More data can be better. Can be overwhelming, but it's good to have a good data set. Forgive me now as if I talk about my brain as if it exists in its own separate entity, but this is what is helping me to focus my attention for now. For the first time in my life, I can see the way my brain is working. I only received my autism diagnosis this year, and I'm still unpicking what that means for me. Ditto for the complex PTSD. My ADHD was diagnosed a little but not that much earlier, and that is thunder. So it's raining and now we have thunder. All of these things exist as layers that add complexity to my experience of the world, that is as chaotic and difficult as it is brilliant and beautiful. Then there's my own core self, my personality, my environment, past, present, and what I can imagine my future. My complex PTSD manifests as what I'd call adopted behaviour, so traits that are not inherently me, but that I've adopted as a coping mechanism. The barnacles on my ship. That's again another story. My brain is hungry for deep stimulation. It wants to know and understand everything. Its appetite for ideas, possibilities, and synthesis is insatiable. It is driven to engage in a particular aspect of learning, the creative or synergistic, rather than the information gathering. So I'm not so much a fact collector. I don't really memorise things like the periodic table. I'm a scientist, I'm autistic. You'd think I'd know that thing inside out, but I don't. Even the elements that I know and talk about a lot, I have to look it up. I don't keep that in there. What I keep in there is synergies of creative, of daisy chains, that kind of thing. But it's an addictive behaviour that my brain has developed. And like all addictive behaviour, how I'm going about collecting information is neither healthy nor rewarding. It's becoming chaotic. Hoarding manifested like this becomes brain fog or idea constipation. I know intellectually that time keeps marching on. I know the ideas that I take in and cook or try to cook with will have to be served up and digested by others soon. I know that ideas kept in the oven too long will burn and turn to ash, but I just can't get it together. Back to the vintage or charity shop. I know that there are limits to my capacity, my shop, and I know that to be effective and to avoid being overwhelmed by other people's rubbish, too much charity, or charity of the wrong type, or vintage that's not vintage, that I won't be able to accept everything. I have to set out a manifesto. But a manifesto requires clear intent, rules, and rules are inflexible and rigid, and I value flexibility and creativity. What if I set out my rules, then an opportunity comes along and I can't take it? Or it doesn't come along because I didn't invite it? What if I make the wrong intentions? What if I don't know, after all, what people want? I mean, I am autistic, I don't read people well. What if I get it all right, but when I serve them, they don't like or appreciate what I've created? It's not as good as other people's. What if I don't like being tied down after all? What if I don't like what I've created? And with that, I identified the problem. My vintage shop, my charity shop, is being run by a hoarder. My hoarder is being run by its addiction. My addiction is being fueled by my autistic love of patterns, my ADHD executive dysfunction, my fears of getting off the fence stemming from complex PTSD, and my personal value system which centres around creativity, flexibility, industry and order. There's many conflicts there, but at least I'm starting to see where they are and what they are. It's time for the curator. I must curate myself. To curate is a word that comes from the Latin, to take charge of or organise. It actually comes from the word care, which could encompass things like spiritual welfare, guardianship and management. And I think that's really cool because one of the things I've been struggling with through therapy is, what do you call them? I've literally, the word was there and it's gone. Mantras. I couldn't think of the word mantras. So one of the things that I was going to try is saying positive affirmations, mantras to myself in the mirror, but I really struggle with that, and I've struggled with it because it doesn't feel authentic. How can I say that I'm great and I'm this and I'm that, and then go out into the world and have these constant troubles? Clearly there's something wrong. So this idea of curating and care and well-being and guardianship, looking after myself, it's something that I haven't been doing well, and maybe this is the key. This whole mental exercise started with two ideas that both fit and didn't fit my reality. The charity or vintage shop, which could become, or aspire to be, a museum or a well-organised laboratory, a place where things happen, where valuable things are looked after, where they're available to look at through new eyes when you need them. The hoarder. The hoarder became the addict, and the addicted hoarder, is aspiring to be a powerful creator or curator. Where's that bird gone? There it is. Oh, it's a wattle bird. I became overtly conscious that I've been talking about myself in dualistic terms during the summing up of this exercise. That the hoarder addict was my brain and that the charity vintage shop was my body. In a neat and beautifully satisfying twist of fate, things are becoming clearer, and I can now start to see how to solve this puzzle, my world famous 47-year-old problem of becoming overwhelmed, chaotic, and not reaching my full potential. I know I need to ground myself somatically. This is something I've talked about in therapy on a few occasions. I need to honour my desire to bend with the breeze, but I do need to be grounded. Trees, rather than bricks and mortar stores, are a better analogy for me, so maybe I can imagine my charity vintage store as a tree. The manifesto or business plan for my store becomes my roots. The act of doing, growing and serving in the store become the trunk and the main branches, each of which can grow, but when they grow slowly, deliberately and carefully. My mind becomes the leaves, the fruits, the seeds and blossoms, its thirst for novelty satisfied by its need to respond to the changing seasons, the predictable unpredictability of the weather, and the creatures that stop by, the energetic flush that comes with each gentle breeze or blustering storm, the extremes of hot and cold, dark and light, drenched and parched, the comfort of knowing that the ride can be enjoyed even, because underneath it all lies the strength, trunk, roots and soil. I must go now for this work to be done. And with that I'll leave you. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but what I do know is that in these pages, through writing this, through making these videos, I'm really starting to help understand what's going on under these complex layers which have been making it very, very hard to understand what's the next step to take in my journey towards being the most effective, happy, healthy, balanced me that I can be. I hope this helps you too.